$1 to get into your house at night. You know, you got to put $1 in the door to get into, to unlock your door. But then you turn around the other side of it, and they're bringing in this money and this revenue, and there's no responsibility for the profiteers of the event center to pay towards the bond payment. There's many people who have suggested to the mayor before the vote that any extra profits, through sponsorships or whatever, should go towards, and all he ever answered was, well, that's a possibility. But there's never been anything set in stone. And I see this a lot with a lot of things. For instance, how many people here play indoor tennis?
Play what?
Indoor tennis. I didn't get not one single person. Does anyone here play tennis? You do, okay. Okay.
That's
got
why
one.
I live in Sioux Falls. So.
What's that? You don't live in Sioux Falls, okay. This is a prime example right here. I can't get one single person to raise their hand. We are giving $500,000 to an indoor tennis facility, and let's pretend for a moment that the mayor isn't involved and his wife's not involved and everything else. Let's say it's a whole other group of people. This is a prime example of how we pay taxes, they take our money, they put it towards a facility, they say they're helping us because now we have an indoor tennis place to play at. And then anybody who makes any profits or benefit, because it's going to be privately owned, so anything, any money or any revenue that place makes is going to go right back into their pockets. And what did we get out of it? We got a receipt, you know, pretty much. And it's like that with a lot of things in town. And I'm a firm believer in democracy. You have to share expenses. We all pay for the roads, you know, we all pay for the sewer system, you know, it's all, you know, the parks and stuff like that. But there's a fine line there between what is public and private, and what should government provide us? Should government provide us entertainment? Should government build us an indoor pool? Is those things that government is supposed to do? Some people say yes. Some people say, well, no, not really. You know, it's an age-old argument, you know. But I'm on the fence a lot about what should we be paying for and what we should not be paying for. But hey, you know, we got to attract doctors to town, so the only way we can do that is if we have entertainment facilities, because we need a couple more multi-million-dollar doctors in town.
Who play tennis.
Yeah, play tennis.
I have a question, and this is kind of switching gears, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. But I feel like perhaps too late, or not too late, but later than I should have, I realized how important it is to be, to know what's going on in local government, state government, and then also to become, you know, a voice in that, and to, you know, like you had mentioned earlier, talk to your elected officials. That's their job, is to talk to you. But I was just wondering if you have any advice, especially a lot of times, you know, I meet people and coming from maybe a more minority standpoint, such as if you are an atheist or whatever that minority may be, you know, that they're really afraid to take an active role or to, you know, even go to a meeting and even go to a meeting or, you know, let alone call someone or email someone or talk to someone. And I was just wondering if you have any advice for people in that situation and how to get started.
Well, don't be intimidated by that. A lot of city councilors are, you know, just like you and me, you know, got jobs, you know, businesses, you know, not all of them are, you know, Jim Edgman is a prime example of probably really wasn't, you know, the average Sioux Falls Joe sitting on the city council. Kenny Anderson, Kermit Staggers on their set, that's whole, you know, college professor. Kenny, I think, works for Daktronics now. You know, average Joes. So don't be afraid to approach them. And don't always go there just when you have a problem. That's the biggest thing when people, when they only want to pay attention, is when they have an issue or they have a problem that's affecting them. Then they show up to city council meetings. That's too bad. Well, that's kind of how I got started at it. The first city council meeting I ever went and spoke to was when Tim Cannon, who owns Stogie's Cigar Bar downtown, was proposing his bar. He hadn't told anybody what he was doing yet. He just said that. They closed the loop. And I showed up, I wasn't totally opposed to closing the loop, but they had suggested all these other crazy things they wanted to do. They wanted to barricade the streets after 2 a.m. And I said, you can't do that. You got emergency vehicles that have to be places. I mean, what are they gonna do? They had to stop the ambulance, pull the barricades up, you know? So there was a lot of things that they wanted to do that got thrown out. And I was actually glad that I showed up and said something. And because the other counselors are like, well, I can't really do that. But they ultimately did close the loop. But, you know, just pay attention every once in a while and watch them. You learn a lot. You learn more when you're there, sitting there, because the little camera, when you watch it on TV, you know, it only puts its thing on certain people. If you sit in the audience, you get to watch all their different facial expressions and their little whisper sessions with each other. And sometimes they're funny and they leave their microphone on and say something. Or they're watching television. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, City Councilor Dee Knudsen was watching television
The Olympics.
during because they could simulcast TV on their computers. And she was watching the Olympics and Larry King, and she would always complain that the meetings were too long. She's sitting there watching TV the whole time. I didn't understand why she's mad. But this is really, here's a little funny inside story on this too. The TV, someone tipped off the TV people. It wasn't me. It was I don't even remember who tipped them off. Someone called. What's that?
Another counselor.
Another counselor told the TV that, you know, she's watching TV, she watches it. And this has been going on for a while. Andy Howes, I don't know if you know who he is, his family owns Howes well. He used to watch baseball games to the council meetings all the time. And, watching a baseball game, that's not too distracting. You know, but she, Dee thought this is a funny little story, Dee thought for the longest time that Kermit is the one that he was serving on the council with her at that time. And she refused to talk to him for months and months and months. And Kermit, I probably shouldn't be talking about that, but Kermit actually grabbed her one day and said, Dee, are you mad at me about something? You refused to talk to me. And she kind of admitted that she thought that he turned her in. He's like, no, I didn't turn you in. You know, and he told her, you know, when Andy Howes was up here and the other guys were on the city council, you know, they were watching baseball games. I never turned them in. That's their deal. That's what they want to do with their time. That's their deal. You know. And there's another little tidbit a lot of people might not know, because I've been following this for a while, that Darren Smith, who's head of community development, was on the city council. And he resigned. And 3 years into his term, or 3 years into his term, he resigned, and he didn't finish the last year of his term. He claimed because he was running, I think it was the American Lung Association. American Heart Association in South Dakota. And, you know, there was things going around like he just didn't want to do it anymore. And he claimed that it was a bylaw with his employer that he couldn't be on this body. Well, they had hired Darren when he was sitting on the city council. So if they would have had a problem with that, they should have said something at that time. The irony of this is Darren was helping Ether run for office, and he was immediately almost appointed once Ether became in office. My argument has always been, Darren never really had time for the city when he was a city councilor, and now all of a sudden he works for the city. And, you know, so there's always that kind of stuff going on too. And I'm a big, unless you're dying of something terminal, or your family is in total shambles and you have to attend to them, there's no excuse for not finishing your term out. And this happens a lot in the state, in the legislature, and it's happened quite a few times on the city council. And there almost seems like there's this elitist attitude sometimes, and it's not just the council and the state legislature. There's this attitude that it's just like, oh, I'm here. They get paid. I don't know if anybody know how much city councilors get paid. It's about, I think they got a raise again. $18,000 a year. And you have to realize this is a part-time job. They got to go to committee meetings and stuff. But if you ask them how much time they spend, it's about, you know, they count phone calls and emailing and stuff like that. I don't really think that counts, but they about 20 hours a week. But it's a pretty good paid gig. $18,000 a year for a part-time job isn't bad. I don't think anybody in town pays that. You know, so, you know, that's another thing that some people don't realize. I had a lady get really mad at me one time at a meeting. I went up and talked to them, and I said something to the fact that they didn't like being up there, or didn't like taking criticism from the citizens, that they should just quit or resign. And some lady said something to me after the meeting, they're up there, blah, blah, blah. And I go, do you think they're volunteers? Is that what you're saying to me? Well, yeah. And I go, no, they get paid to be up there. They get paid, they get cell phone reimbursement. If they make any trips in city business, that's all reimbursed. And then they get their $18,000 a year. And so, you know, it's a paid gig. It's a pretty nice paid gig. And I believe the county commission, who do a lot more because they're commissioners, they get about $27,000 a year. So it's not bad. Not bad gig. Yeah.
I had a question about like the ordinances or measures or whatever they pass. Like our state government is very well known for passing horrible laws. And
one word, Alec.
Huh?
Alec. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah. And you know, the harebrained creationist who thinks they can sneak something through.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the city council has anything like that that would be something that we as a group would be concerned about science, religion, secular government.
No, they got to kind of stay out of that. The one thing they do forget, and they've lost, I know of 3 South Dakota Supreme Court cases they've lost. While we have a city charter, when they take their oath of office, they must follow the U.S. Constitution first, and the state constitution second, and the city charter is third. Now, they've claimed that they've gotten themselves in trouble with trying to limit casinos. Well, they can't do that. That's a state issue. But they tried to do it. They lost in Supreme Court. They lost to the gentleman back here on the red light cameras. You know, because it was giving the ticket to the owner of the vehicle and not to the actual driver. It's unconstitutional. They lost there. They lost on a code enforcement issue over a piece of cement. They often try to claim that the city charter is all powerful within the city. But that's not true. And they've been repeatedly losing on these cases. And but I wouldn't worry too much about the religious aspect of that. You know, the mayor will tell you that he's a follower of God, but I don't think he'd ever like try to do anything to you know, do that. But like I mentioned to you before with the state, you know, you've ever heard the organization ALEC? It's the American Legislative and Educating, whatever. Well, they get a lot of money funneled through them. They don't take money. They don't give money to anybody. They have other groups that funnel money, and then they write what they call model legislation for all the states. And that's why these crazy things come up, is because of ALEC. Because our state legislators are pretty lazy too. They don't accomplish much at all.
When we were in Pierre, for those who don't know, in like February, March, 5 of us went to Pierre, and one of them, Stace Nelson, was Facebooking like the entire time, and like we could totally see his screen, like way up in the crowd. So yeah, they're lazy.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is they complain about pay all the time, but for some reason they all run and all keep going back there. And lobbyists, I know lobbyists, and they get a lot of little gifts from lobbyists. They're not getting rich. I mean, these lobbyists aren't giving them $1 million checks, you know. But they could have 6 free meals a day if they wanted to. There's always something going on during the legislative session. There's a free breakfast here. There's a lunch here. They have parties they can go to at night where it's all free, and all these different lobbyist groups put on this stuff. They have it pretty good while they're there. I mean, you know, they only get $6,000 a year, but they really don't have to work too hard. You know, and if you're not on any committees and you're in the Democratic Party, you know, you really don't have a lot to do. Show up, you know, and breathe every once in a while. That's about it. But the biggest problem is ALEC. And, you know, I was very disappointed that the state taxpayers are paying for our ALEC membership, because ALEC is a horrible organization. I don't know if any of you are Republican or Democrat or whatever, but it's a terrible, terrible legislation. The biggest thing I have a problem with it is that, well, it's corporations that are feeding them this legislation, but our legislators should be writing their own laws and their own bills that have to do with us and help us. They shouldn't be concerned about what these other corporations are doing. But you bring up a good point about the city charter. It's constantly changing. They're always changing ordinances, and then the city council gets to vote on it. But most of the time, these changes are proposed by the mayor. And sometimes it gets shot down. Not a lot, but you know that's kind of how it works. Director of one of the departments says, I don't like this ordinance, it affects us, let's change it. They bring it in front of a committee, the mayor says yes, then they put it in front of the council, and the council will change it. So I guess it's kind of a living document, you know, it's constantly changing, so. Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't kind of shift gears a little bit. For the meeting that Amanda's doing the opening for,
Yeah.
do we know what's on the docket for that meeting? Do we know?
Yeah, they usually post the agenda online on the city website, usually Friday afternoon before the Tuesday meeting. They got to do 24 hours before, so they usually do it on Friday. Invocations right at the beginning, and I always announce who's doing it. And
That's a good way, you know, if people have an interest in local government, that's a good way to start, is to go online. You can watch the meetings live or at your convenience. They have the agenda right there. You can click onto the, only the items you're interested in, or listen to the whole thing. All the documents that are presented are online. And
when it works.
Scott can tell you, Scott can tell you that you can look at an agenda and it may not look interesting at all, but something interesting always happens.
Yeah, there's usually some things, you know, sometimes people don't know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, there's some things that are just buried and they don't know what they're talking about. I follow it enough that I read ahead of time, so I kind of know what's going on. But one of the most interesting things is if there's a controversial item of some kind, or whatever you want to say, the city councilors get to ask questions of the city directors. And the stonewalling that goes on is just, it's funny to watch, but it's also very frustrating, because you'll have to watch the different councilors and how they pose their questions. And they'll all ask the same question, but they keep changing it to try to trip up the city director to say, well, I can't answer that, or I'm not sure, or you know, stuff like that. A great example of this is a few years ago. I don't know if anybody knows who Mike Cooper is. He's director of planning. Well, he used to be the parks director. He got promoted, I guess. I don't know how you would look at that. So anyway, he's been the planning director for quite a while. You know the River Greenway. We have all these pillars and steps and bulkheads and spray
into the big Sioux River.
Into the big Sioux River, yeah, and the 15th dirtiest river in the country. And did you know that originally that project, I mean, what is it up to now? It's 18 million?
The proposal is that the entire project will cost $36 million.
At the end, when it's all done. Now, this is shock you a little bit. The original project was supposed to cost between $2.5 and $4 million. And all they really were going to do is clean up along there, re-landscape, fix the bike trail, which they've done, and put in some park benches and more of that kind of stuff. And everyone was kind of like, well, you know, that's great. And Mike Cooper was asked, I remember that meeting when they asked for that initial $4 million. They said, well, how does this $4 million break down? And this is an example of city directors stonewalling, not answering questions, you know, even though they know the answer. And he says, well, $2.5 million of it's going to be spent on this. And he totally knew what he was talking about. And then they said, well, what's the other $1.5 million to be spent on? And he says, you know, other stuff. And they he didn't say it like that, but he kind of said, well, there's going to be some other things. Well, what other stuff? well, you know, we're gonna do, you know, we might do this, there's some design, and he had no answer. He just wanted $4 million, and River Greenway has skyrocketed from there. City Council constantly approves it, moves it along.
Well, and they've run into all kinds of problems with bedrock and
Quartz.
contaminated soil. And there actually would be a several $million cost overrun already. But they went in and took the Morels, the settlement with Morels for $2 million that was supposed to be designated to improve the quality of the water. It is now in those quartzite walls.
That's the kind of the shifting they do around, you know, with the money.
And the bridge that goes across there was $1 million. That pedestrian bridge.
By truck.
It goes from the Raven parking lot to the parking lot of the Country Inn and Suites. $1 million.
It's a nice bridge, though.
It is. It's very beautiful. My biggest thing that I have with it is it's classic developers get multi-million-dollar you know, landscaping around their buildings
That we pay for.
that we pay for. And they want to do it on their own or share the cost. I even suggested sometimes just share the cost. You pay half, we pay half, whatever. And you know, it goes kind of by the wayside.
Is downtown Sioux Falls, because I know they do stuff down there, are they affiliated with the city or are they just?
They get money. They get money 2 ways. Well, they get grants and stuff too, so they get money privately. But there's 2 ways they get money, and a lot of people don't know this either. One is the city just gives them a chunk of money, and through different things. And then another way they get money is downtown property owners pay a special tax on their assessment. Some of them are fine with it. They think it's great because they're giving it to downtown Sioux Falls to promote downtown. But it extends out quite a ways. For instance, you ever seen Eiler's Body Shop? Does anybody even know where that's at? Okay. What does that have to do with, you know, entertainment downtown? Nothing. But he has to pay that tax. There's several apartment buildings that are kind of off away from downtown, but in the area that have to pay the tax. And there was a couple of them sued, didn't want to pay it. I don't have a problem with it. I think it should be voluntary, though. I think that if you want downtown Sioux Falls to promote you, then you pay the tax. If you don't, you know, whatever. That's another thing. Downtown Sioux Falls gets, and this is really funny. The only reason I know this is because I've worked at several downtown businesses. You have to become a member. Okay, they have memberships, but you don't have to become a member of downtown Sioux Falls. This is where they make their other money. So, say for instance, you are Minerva's. They're a member. They pay a membership fee every year. And what downtown Sioux Falls does for that membership fee is they water the flowers, they sweep the sidewalks, they put on the festivals, they promote things. They, you know, they do all this stuff. And some things they do well, some things they don't. But if you're not a member and you choose not to participate in the group, they will not put you on any of their periodicals, maps. I don't know if you've ever seen the Sioux Falls, the downtown magazine. I think the Argus publishes it 4 times a year or 2 times a year. There's a map in there of all the eating establishments and other retail downtown. If you are not a member of downtown Sioux Falls, you are not on that map. And I can understand them not letting you put advertisements in there because you're not a member. But I've always thought it was kind of foolish of them to, even though you're not a member, your job is to promote downtown. And that should be everyone, right? You know. But if you're not a member, they punish you. They won't do stories about you. They don't do pictures of your building. They don't talk about your, you know, none of that stuff is included. I think it's wrong because we as taxpayers are giving them money, and whether they're a member or not, they are giving them money, and they should promote. They should promote all of downtown. They shouldn't be this you know, you got to be a part of our club, or we're not going to be. I hope you know. But she had a question back there.
Oh yes, I was wondering if you had any insights on that Elmwood Golf Course Hotel complex. Who's behind that?
I don't know, but we are paying for it. You know that, right? We are going to pay their
hell of a
we're gonna
lot.
pay to build it, we're gonna pay to build it, and our incentive is we get to share in the profits. Well, you know, my thing is about that is, number one, we were talking about earlier, what do you think the city should pay for? You know, should they pay for entertainment centers, indoor pools and stuff like this? I absolutely do not think a city should be in the business of lodging. I don't care if it's on a public golf course. That should be privately owned, let them make as much money as they want to from golfers, and, you know, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But we're gonna build, as I understand it, we're building the hotel, and we're profit sharing with them. Well then, you know, how is that helping us in any way, shape, or form? Kind of sounds like the hotel is getting away with a lot of things. Now, I don't know if you saw all the drawings. They plan on building a mall out there. There's a mall that's gonna run from that hotel and the golf course all the way to, almost all the way up to where the event center's at. On the other side of Russell, of course, but it's gonna run all the way, and they envision I think two more hotels, a bunch of restaurants, and a mall. And it's gonna be one of those indoor-outdoor malls, you know, where you don't walk, you can walk through the mall, but there's also gonna be an outdoor space where you can go into all the storefronts. That's their vision, and we're probably gonna be paying for a lot of it. And I think the city's going a little overboard when we're buying hotels and malls. It's, you know, it's a strange thing. I've never heard of a municipality subsidizing a hotel before. Unless it's, I've heard of it in little towns that don't have a hotel, and so they need like one hotel because they're on a highway. So the city will give them money because they need to have a hotel there. But I've never seen anything like this. We have lots of hotels. There is no reason why the taxpayers of Sioux Falls need to subsidize a hotel.
I gotta believe that somebody is gonna really benefit from this, and I'm just wondering who it was, if anybody knew yet.
Yeah, the people that are gonna run the hotel.
Yeah, right. Does anybody know who they are?
Builders.
Well,
Builders.
yeah. And that's always been my argument about the event center, is that it was just a way to generate money for contractors, you know, but, you know, I may be wrong, I don't know.
What's the status of the Fairfield out there at the new little user complex? Or
What
Santa
field?
complex?
What field?
It's Fairfield Inn.
You know, I drove out there yesterday because I'd never been out there, and the parking lot was full, and not completely full. And then that restaurant that's out there, that parking lot was completely full. I was like, where are these people coming from?
Do you know that the people that work out there will not be allowed, when they clock in the mornings, they will not be allowed to leave until they leave in the evening. They have to eat there and they have to stay there all day. They can't go up to Denny's or anywhere else to eat.
Why is that?
That's the rule. That's a gentleman that works down
They
there.
can bring a sack punch though, right?
No. Well, I don't know about a second thing. That wouldn't surprise me if they say no to that. But
Well, if anybody doesn't have anything else, that's about it, I guess. Okay.
Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
no problem.
For coming.
Our blog is SouthDacola.com. I don't know if